Hello and welcome to Sundoku. This is where you're welcome if you love books. If you're the kind of person who likes to cuddle up on the couch and spend hours in that world that's written for you, you're among friends. Welcome. I'm Sarah Martin. Today we're bringing you a mini-sode. Every so often there is a chat that we have with an author that is just needing to be shared straight away. And this is one that I know you will appreciate. It's pacey, it's fun, it's interesting, and you can go and get the book today and read it if you like. I recently caught up with Louise Milligan. You may know her from Four Corners on the ABC. She's also previously written non-fiction books focused on investigative journalism called Cardinal and Witness. Now she's turned her hand to fiction. And her new book, Pheasants Nest, tells the story of Kate Delaney, a journalist living out every woman's worst fear, being attacked and kidnapped on a night out with friends. And what unrolls from there is the story from Kate's perspective, but also from those who are trying to find her. So we hear from the perspectives of her boyfriend, her best friend, and also from police who have their own challenges. It's funny, gritty, and smart, and I know you're going to love it. I'm going to stop raving, and I'll just let you have a listen to my conversation with Louise Milligan. I hope you enjoy. Congratulations on your first novel.
Thanks so much.
It must feel pretty amazing to produce a body of work that is allowing your imagination to go run wild a little bit.
Yeah, totally. It does. I mean, I've said to people it kind of feels like putting your heart on a plate and saying, what do you think of my heart? But it's also, well, you know, as a journalist, like you just go around the world like a magpie kind of picking up stories, and you are privy to so many amazing things. And so it's not that hard a transition, actually. Well, it wasn't for me. I just dived right in and, you know, it just made sense.
Did you find the discipline of writing fiction different to the discipline of writing non-fiction?
Oh, totally. I mean, both of my non-fiction books were passion projects about, you know, very difficult subjects, but they required so much more research and fact-checking and all of that sort of stuff, whereas this was just letting my imagination run wild. I mean, I did have to, you know, fact-check bits and pieces, but comparatively, it's so freeing. I mean, one of the big things was the fact that, you know, with my previous books, they were about quite difficult, risky subjects. And so I had to be so careful, and there was a sense of almost hypervigilance about it. And I was very thankful for my sort of training as a Four Corners journalist and the fact-checking that we do. But yeah, this was just a joy. I loved it so much.
When this landed with me, I went, why did you choose crime? I mean, you could have written a romance novel and gone super light and into a world that doesn't, you know, tie you back into those dark topics. Yeah, what was it that made you choose the genre?
I didn't choose the genre. I just wrote the book. Well, I've never read a romance novel in my life, so I can't imagine I would ever write one. I'm not into the science fiction or fantasy or anything like that. Like I generally read literary fiction. So I just wanted to write the book that meant something to me. And when I first started writing it, it was actually back in 2015. And I had covered the year before the tragic murder of Jill Meagher, the Irish-Australian woman who worked for the ABC. And I was the first journalist to interview her lovely husband, Tom. And I got to know him reasonably well after that process. And I was really, really moved by that case. And I sort of started thinking about, what if Jill didn't die? You know, what if she was kidnapped instead? And what if she was a journalist and she's actually more like me than Jill? And she has this sort of knowing approach to victimhood, and also a more empowered approach to victimhood, because she knows how these things play out because she's been covering them herself. But also, like you say, that I'm diving into dark territory, but one of the things that I really, really wanted to inject the book with was a lot of levity and, you know, the gallows humour that we as journalists use in order to make our work bearable, basically. So I wanted her to have a really good sense of humour, and the other characters to have a sense of comedy about them as well, and tragicomedy in some ways as well. So, you know, that was a big part of my process. So there's a sort of a sense of lightness that sort of gallops along. You're not in the dirge. I couldn't have written a book that was just unremittingly depressing. Like, I just couldn't do that.
It's interesting you say that it was written so closely after the crime with Jill Maher, because I wrote her name down when I started reading to ask you about the character of Kate and her connection to Jill, because that was such a significant and horrible, heart-wrenching crime. And I saw the parallel very quickly, and yeah, I found that really interesting, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, I only wrote 3 chapters back in 2015, and then I put it away for 7 years.
Wow.
But yeah, it was kind of like almost my little tribute to Jill, who by all accounts was a wonderful woman. I wrote the 3 chapters, and then not long after that I started covering the Child Abuse Royal Commission, and that sort of set me on the train that ended up with my first book, Cardinal, and then my second book, Witness. And then all of a sudden, you know, I had been just working so hard, and, you know, all the stuff that goes along with putting out books. And 7 years later, got to a point where I needed a bit of a breather, and I thought I'd like to write a novel. And I kept thinking, I remember those 3 chapters that I wrote, you know, way back in 2015 when I didn't know how to write books. You know, I didn't have a publisher. And I went back to it. I tinkered with it a little bit, but not much. And I thought, yeah, I think this still stands up. You know, I think this is quite good. And I sent it to my dear friend Louise Adler, who was the publisher of my first 2 books. And she's also like a complete crime nut, so I didn't know that. But she was like, I love it. And she was just encouraging me to keep going. And I got a very sort of full-on COVID. I was having fever dreams and things like that, and I wrote 6 chapters in a week from my COVID bed, basically, and that was it. I was totally hooked then. And then every day I had a rule that, you know, even if I just write a paragraph, then that'll be fine. And you always end up writing more than a paragraph. So I just kind of gave up TV. That was really what I did, yeah.
That's great. It feels like it's got that energy through it, that propulsion.
Yeah, the gallop.
It really does.
I was galloping myself, yeah.
I read this faster than I've read a book in ages, because I just was like, I want to know what's going on. And it was accessible, engaging and funny and challenging. I loved it. So
Thank you so much. Yeah, I really wanted to write it for women like us who are busy, right? But, you know, intelligent. I mean, not just women, obviously for men as well, but I was thinking about women, like how hard it is to read books, and if they're a punish, even if they are technically good, it's just like, oh, I can't deal with this. I wanted it to be engaging and have that sense of pace that you can't put it down, and you love the characters and you miss the characters when you leave them. But at the same time, it's not intellectually patronising. It's smart, you know.
Talking about characters, I feel like all of your characters were fully formed. I liked the way that you gave them all enough of a story, and it just added that bit of complexity to all of their experiences. And having known your background, I'm like, so much of this would have been drawn from characters that you've met along the way and seen along the way. So talking about our protagonist and her immediately going, oh no, what are the cops going to do? And then your cops are doing what she's expecting, because of course she looked first to the person who's the closest to a victim to see if they're guilty. And also then you talked more about the police officer, D'Ambrosio, who's experienced PTSD, and really you showed a better understanding of those situations than if it's just a thought experiment?
I've met an awful lot of police with PTSD. I did a series of stories for 7:30 a few years ago about that, and I just had huge empathy for these men and women because they experience so much secondary trauma in their line of work, and I am someone who has experienced secondary trauma in my line of work. But what they experience is so much more full on. And then when they make a claim, with the insurer, this is what I found in my stories, the insurer it treated them very shabbily. And it's a really painful process for them. And then they're sort of treated a bit like their problem is catching and no one really wants to engage with them at work anymore. And I don't know, I just felt really, really sorry for these people that they were treated like that. And a lot of the time cops are cast as villains in a way, and there's a sort of a stereotype of what a police officer is as a person. And I find, they really are all different types of people. And I've made some good friends in former police and current police. And D'Ambrosio, he's got some experiences of one particular police officer that I interviewed, but he has elements of others, and he's just himself. Yeah, I wanted him to be this really sympathetic, lovely character.
Oh, he sounds gorgeous. You've written great characters as humans, but I find that you have made the landscape a character throughout this as well, because the story is set essentially on a line of road, on a highway, the Hume Highway, and I haven't travelled it, but I've now experienced some of it because of your description, and the sense of foreboding you add to that. You've connected it to the hunting ground of Ivan Milat, and it just sends shivers down your spine as a reader to think that somebody knows they're travelling into this world. Was it that made you choose the setting?
The setting was partially because I have driven up and down that road countless times. So I know it really well, and I know the way that the light falls and, the way that the landscape changes as you sort of move up the Hume. But there was a really deliberate reason, going back to the police. I did a coronial inquest when I was a very young journalist at the Australian, and it was about a guy who had jumped off the Pheasants Nest bridge. And the local police in that area had this terrible PTSD toll because of what they had seen, because the fact that they'd had to collect so many bodies from the bottom of the Pheasants Nest bridge. And when I was thinking about this character being kidnapped and taken up the Hume, I just thought that was a way that I could weave in this sort of trauma narrative about the police. And so the local cop, D'Ambrosio, is based near the Pheasants Nest Bridge, and that's why he's got PTSD.
Another thing that I found interesting is how small things like folklore and superstition and the gallows humour that you were talking about that can be shared amongst friends and amongst lovers in a new light and under suspicion can be treated in a very different way and turned around on people. Was that drawn from your interviews with other people about how the system has treated them, or were you just sort of putting yourself in a person's shoes?
No, more just putting myself in a person's shoes. And actually, nothing about the way that I wrote this book was sort of arch. I didn't have some grand plan. I basically just started writing, and the characters were almost telling me what to do next. And I was like, oh yeah, so that is exactly what Kate would do in this situation. That is what Liam would do in this situation, her boyfriend who's a lawyer. So, someone said to me the other day, it's such a beautifully structured novel. And I was like, well, that's a bit of an accident, really. A happy accident, but an accident nonetheless.
Oh my goodness, I love that. I love how Sylvia, her friend, will turn up to the middle of the bush with knee-high cowboy boots.
Gold cowboy boots, yeah.
Oh my gosh.
She has a lot of similarities with my best friend, who is not a journalist, but she worked in fashion for a long time, And she used to always joke about having 3 sleeves. She owned a shop in Melbourne that was very sort of 3 seasons ahead. And I always used to feel quite daggy when I went in there because I wasn't cool enough. So, yeah, there's a scene in the book, as you know, where they're at the police station and it's like this really, really intense moment. And Sylvia puts who's quite a daffy kind of character, puts her head on the desk and she's just sobbing. And Liam, the boyfriend, notices that the 3rd sleeve is kind of draped over the desk, and he's just like, and he can just imagine Kate all the way through, because Kate swears like a trooper and saying, "Oh, for fuck's sake, Sylvia." Like, for fuck's sake, Sylvia wearing gold cowboy boots to a police interview. And, you know, that is exactly what my best friend Karen would do. But Sylvia is a Filipina Australian, and I went to the Philippines a few years ago for a Four Corners story, and I've sort of known Filipino and Filipina people over the years, and I just find them a really like wonderful kind of culture, and I just thought it'd be cool to have a person from the Philippines in the book. So she's like this fashion journalist who is very funny.
Yeah, I love it. Those moments of light are just great throughout it.
I actually feel like she's a real person. Like, I mean, I kind of feel like that with all of them. It's funny, like with Liam, the boyfriend, a few of my girlfriends said to me, "Oh my God, I just wish..." Actually, my best friend Karen said to me, because she's single, she was like, "I just wish that he actually existed, Louise."
You wrote the dream man.
I would totally date him.
Now, Kate is Irish. Did you choose her because of your own experience and your mum?
Yeah, totally. I mean, Kate has a lot of my stories. I mean, she's not me. She has a very different family experience to me, for instance. She's an only child. I've got 2 brothers. Her father's a difficult man. My father's a beautiful man. Her mother's quite different to mine. Both her parents are dead. Mine are living. You know, she has lots of different things as well. But I did, you know, being an Irish Australian is such a huge part of my identity, and the struggle between the sort of cultures. And I really wanted to draw on some of that experience. And in that COVID week, when, you know, I was having the crazy fever dreams and whatever, that's when I came up with the whole thing about the Child of Prague statue.
Okay.
Which is a statue of the baby Jesus that people in Ireland are given the night before they get married, and you are supposed to put it out. You actually have to behead it, and you put it outside so that it won't rain, which makes total sense. Total sense.
100%.
Like, no, yeah, nothing weird about that whatsoever. And there's a character in the book called Auntie Maggie, who is based on my Auntie Chrissy. She's actually, of all the characters in the book, like all the other characters are not a person that I know, but she is pretty much my Auntie Chrissy, like almost entirely my Auntie Chrissy, who, you know, God rest her soul. And when I was a child, I was the favourite great niece of Auntie Chrissy, and she sort of treated me, you know, like a child right up to the time that I was an adult, and then she gave me a Child of Prague statue, like when I was like 21, and I was like, oh, like all of a sudden I'm an adult now, and you're giving me a statue for when, you know, I get married so it doesn't rain. But of course this thing was huge. So this did happen. It's in the book. It was the size of a cricket bat, and I did leave the thing in the bin at Dublin Airport.
Oh my goodness.
But nothing else happened. My partner is not an Irish Catholic background, and he did not have a Child of Prague statue. I made all that up. And I mean, the other thing about the Irish thing is as well, like being a migrant child, well, it certainly was difficult when I came to Australia. I went to, like Kate, a quite monocultural school at first, although I then went to another one that was more multicultural. But I was teased mercilessly, and it does make you very determined and, you know, feisty. And I thought, you know, that would be a good thing to have for my character as well.
About the offender, why does he never get a name even when he finally is identified?
I don't think it was a conscious choice, but I think underlying it, Jill's mum used to get really upset about the killer in that case being named. And I don't know, it was just sort of like the guy doesn't get to have a name. Like, it's not about him. And one of the things that I really wanted to subvert in terms of the crime genre was that so often the victim is sort of depersonalised. The victim is, you know, like Laura Palmer in Twin Peaks, you know, like she's sort of dead, she's wrapped in plastic.
An idea over here.
She's the other. Whereas this was, you know, I want it to be from her experience, and especially a knowing experience. She knows how these things play out, not just in the media, but also in the court system. And she knows that a lot of killers are stupid people that make stupid decisions. It's not the idea of the Silence of the Lambs, you know, some diabolical criminal mastermind. It's a person who made a split decision that was really dumb. And because of that dumb decision, people die, or people get raped, or, you know, people are traumatized for the rest of their lives. And she's so aware of this, and I wanted to, but I did want to sort of have a little bit of an exploration about how he came to be who he is. And he's someone who's deeply insecure and basically has always lusted after, he lusts above his station. He lusts after, you know, fabulous women like Kate Delaney who are never going to give him a second look. And he wants to kill her, but he wants to have sex with her. He's kind of an archetype in some ways. But also, as women, we move through the world and are targeted by blokes like this. And I suppose in a way, it was not payback, but just sort of like exposing these people for who they are, you know? I mean, how dare they do these things to women that they do all the time. So yeah, he doesn't get to have a name.
I'm glad he didn't get a name. I see these characters as some of them we're going to go revisit. Yeah.
I am writing another book, and yeah, there will be revisiting of some of the characters.
I'll get some of this information out of you now, and you can tell me the rest next time.
It's a completely different book in lots of ways. I'm really enjoying the process of it, and I've gone back to Ireland on a couple of occasions. So much of my heart is there, but also my experience of being between two cultures. Like, whenever I go to Dublin, as soon as I get there, I need to just sort of like walk around for a day, and I'm just like injected into my veins, you know, like just soaking it all up, and this is where I'm meant to be, and these are my people, and this is my culture. And then I open my mouth and I'm an outsider.
I know, it's so telling, isn't it?
And it's quite jarring, but yeah, so I'd quite like to write about it from that perspective. I'm really excited about that.
Oh, that sounds so fantastic. It's nice to be talking about a book but have the next vision, you know where you're going next. And it sounds to me like you are just loving the process. Louise, thank you for your generosity of time sharing this with me today.
Absolute pleasure.
It's lovely to meet you. And
too.
I can't wait to read the next one.
Yeah, thanks so much. I'll come back again.
Louise Milligan, author of Pheasants Nest. And you can pick that up in all good bookstores now. So I encourage you to get into it. Have a read, you'll tear through it. It's absolutely gripping. Thanks for joining me on the Sundoku Minisode today. We'll be back soon with another full episode, but I hope that's just filled the gaps a little, given you a bit of inspiration, and we look forward to being back with you real soon. Happy reading. This podcast is produced by 4 book addicts refusing treatment.
Kath Keneally, Michaela Andreev, Annie Hastwell,
and me, Sarah Martin. Our thanks to composer Quincy Grant for the music. If you want to know more about the books and authors featured in this episode, check out the show notes. And you can find us on Facebook and Instagram at SundokuCast, TSUNDOKU Cast.